Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live and Uncut. Last week, I hope you enjoyed last week's show when I spoke to High Money and her career in photography. This week, I've got a totally different approach. Rather than talking to photographers, I'm talking to Marc Horner of Fuji, UK, who's sparing some valuable time to speak to me tonight. So, Marc, thank you so much for joining me.
It's no problem at all. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, that's lovely. And got a great banner at the back. They're advertising the XT1, which we're going to come to later and talk about. I want to start off, Mark, basically, where we talk about this is pretty exciting times for Fuji. I just wanted to get a sort of a little bit of an inside knowledge as regards to how does it feel to be working for Fuji at this time?
To be honest, well, it's great. We're obviously broached into a new market over the last few years. We're releasing very exciting products, in my opinion. It's very exciting.
That's good to hear it. So let's go right back from my first experience of realizing that Fuji was in the camera market was when basically they were aligned, working very closely with Nikon and the Fuji DSLR at the time. Can you just sort of give us a bit of a history background there as regards to how that amalgamation, that working relationship developed with Nikon?
Okay. Well, obviously, Fujifilm's history goes back a lot further than working with Nikon. But I guess in
Exactly, yeah.
regards to the digital SLR, obviously the last product that we had was the S5 Pro that was basically based on a Nikon, I believe it's a D200 body, but obviously with our sensor and our technology inside it. It was a successful camera. There was particular, I certainly recall, kind of wedding photographers, people that like the colours, people that like the dynamic range. But I'm not entirely sure the exact reason why we decided to not continue. But we sort of dropped out of that market for a few years, and then the X100 was kind of our first venture back into the sort of serious photography market.
Yeah. How that basically did? Are you aware of how the basic development of the X series came about? Was it right? We're gonna totally take a camera apart and start again, or was it just a feeling that they want to copy one of the famous film cameras, the Leica, which is so often compared to?
I think, I mean, at the time, I think it was quite a big gamble. I think the general philosophy was there's not really a market for this camera, but if we wanted a camera, what would we have if we didn't have to compromise on, for example, any kind of image quality or you know, it was definitely built from the ground up with someone in Japan with a very, very bold idea to make an amazingly attractive looking camera that has fantastic image quality that can genuinely fit in a pocket. Um, Obviously, when we first announced it, I think it was Photokina 4 years ago, or it was an amazing reception. We didn't quite expect it, and then when it was launched and also was very successful, it was a bit of a shock, but in hindsight, not really a shock. We didn't expect it, but in hindsight, we should have really expected it because of where it was and the sort of camera that it was aimed at, and the people that
Yeah.
are really passionate about photography as a hobby. Manual exposure, dials and off you go. And also just a very good looking camera.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of the things which I've got the XE1 and I was out with her doing a photo walk a couple of weeks ago, and the guy was looking at the camera and he said, "What's that?" And I said, "That's where you screw in the trigger, the cable release." And he'd never seen it before because obviously in the old days, well, the newer days now they're all electronic. So this was really how Fuji, I suppose, decided we're going to start again with a camera. We're going to appeal to people that love photography and bring the dials and the knobs back onto the camera, how they used to work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said, our history of photography and cameras and film obviously goes back a very long way.
Mm.
And back in those analog days, the basic controls of a camera were the size of an aperture and the length of the shutters open for, and obviously the film sensitivity. And we sort of decided, well, if you're building a camera again from scratch, and these are the prominent features that you need on the camera, then the retro style, as great as it is to have a cool looking camera, it also is a very practical looking camera because it's how photography started.
Yeah. So from the X100, obviously the X Pro 1 came about and the XE1, and there's just been a steady progression through that period of time with, since then to the present day of exciting new cameras that come on, all using the X-Trans sensor. Could you tell us a little bit more about this? What I believe is just a fantastic sensor, quite honest with you. I think the image that I'm getting from my photography is just out of this world now. Could you tell us a little bit more about the X-Trans sensor, please?
Yeah. Well, basically, the objective really was to create something that can compete with a full frame sensor, but obviously take up less size. Less size obviously means that the actual cameras themselves can be smaller, the lenses can be smaller, and obviously lighter. And again, with the background that we have in film technology, we sort of just really kind of went back to basics and tried to copy our silver halide film. The biggest difference between the X-Trans sensor and a normal Bayer sensor is the way the different colored lights are filtered. So we are able to not have an optical low-pass filter while still not suffering from YRA, which is what is caused on most Bayer sensors. Won't bore into too much detail, but essentially the idea was that we would end up with a camera that can resolve as good as a full-frame sensor while still actually being smaller.
Yeah, and
in most cases, I think as I say, in most cases, I think that has been achieved.
I agree with you, and I think the high ISO range that it's also developed is just outstanding. Quite honest with you, to switch a camera to 6400 ISO and not really worry about it anymore, whereas before you were getting a little bit twitchy about it. It's an amazing performer, the sensor itself. Another thing which I looked actually the images of the way this layout of the sensor. Was there any intention for the sensor to try and mimic the Fuji film style, the Xperia type negatives and the transparencies that were produced, which were loved by the landscape photographers?
Well, I think the main objective from a hardware perspective with the sensor was purely being able to not have an optical low-pass filter and therefore not losing that resolution that all our cameras do. But we have spent, I wouldn't even like to imagine how many man-hours have been spent by lots of our team in Japan who have basically been working on film their entire lives. They live and breathe this, and they're still within these teams now. And these guys have been working on the film simulation modes. We get a lot of incredibly good reviews and feedback regarding the film simulation modes that are built into the cameras and just the JPEG quality in itself. And a lot of that, that has all come from these guys that just basically live and breathe this film even to this day.
Yeah. With the performance of the sensor, comparing it to full frame, I'm going to come back to that subject of full frame at a later point in the chat. But moving on from the camera bodies, which obviously now we have the XE2s, the XMs, the XA, and the XQ style. The lenses is just what really has bowled me over, to be quite honest with whoever termed the word kit lens for the 1855 Fujinon was living in another world. Basically, this is not a kit lens. It is an extremely prime, outstanding lens. I use the word prime not in terms of how we view lenses. This has been a really important part of the development of Fuji, hasn't it? This lens development. Can you obviously tell us a little bit more about that development, please?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like going back to the X100, the very first one. The important thing, really, the absolute priority is that the sensor's good, that the lens is good, and that the exposure controls are right there at your fingertips. Anything else is really a nice to have. So, again, we've got enormous background in lenses. We've been making lenses for all sorts of things like satellites and telescopes and a lot of movie film stuff. Even to this day, we still do the same. But the Fujinon part of the Japanese company is, it's extremely, up to date on that sort of stuff. They've been developing the whole time as lenses have progressed over the last sort of 50 odd years or so. And it's, they've done their best to make sure that all of the lenses that we've created within the XF and even the XC lenses range have been absolutely optimal. Again, it is very much a without compromise when it comes to the actual image quality itself. Obviously, the XC lenses are aimed at a slightly more entry level because they are cheaper and they have a plastic body and they don't have an aperture ring. But there's absolutely no sacrifice to the glass that goes into the lens. And as you said, with the 18 to 55 mm zoom lens, same thing applies. It's not a kit lens. Kit lens is the thing that comes with your entry level DSLR that you throw away as soon as you get it, because you're never going to actually take a picture with it because it's not up to it. The kit lens, well, it's like you said, the person that put the word kit on the lens is should be in trouble, because it's not a kit lens. It's just
no way. And I think one of the other things, which is one of the major advantages of this lens, is the fact that it starts at 2.8 on the aperture, whereas you go to the normal kit lens, which is with the other manufacturers, they generally start at 3.5 or even sometimes 4, and obviously a range out to 5.6 on the zoom end. So they've got these lenses now which are developing, and there's just an absolute, well, there's a good number now which you, as the company, are always showing on your pipeline, but basically what's coming through, which, by the way, I'll be posting that on the show notes afterwards, so you can actually see the map of lenses which is coming out. But one thing which you mentioned before the show started, which is really important to note, and I didn't know this until you mentioned it, you've now managed to, you're working with Zeiss with regards to bringing out some prime lenses to work fully automated with the X series cameras, the interchangeable lens cameras, that is.
Yeah, the Carl Zeiss is they do a range called Tuit, which is a new range for the Fuji X mount, and it's also for one of the Sony mounts as well, for the NEX, I believe. They've released two very, very good quality prime lenses. They've just released a 2.8 50mm macro lens, which I coincidentally happened to have I had one in my hands today for the very first time, because I had Matthew Maddock here visiting, and he lent me his, and I was quite blown away by it, to be honest, especially as we don't have a full 1-to-1 macro lens in our current range. Although they're not us, and it's not our lens that we necessarily need to promote, I personally think it's great that it just adds a little bit of an extra depth to the the lens lineup that we do. And like I say, it's fully compatible.
Fully compatible.
The lenses, all the automatic stuff works.
So what are the lenses in that group now? You've got this new 50mm. What are the other ones?
Well, the Zeiss ones is, I believe off the top of my head, it's 32. It's a 1.8 32mm, which I've used and is very, very sharp. Although, if I'm honest, I think our 35 1.4 is what I prefer, but there's very little in it. And then we also have I believe it's 2.8 aperture, 12mm, which is fantastic. It is quite a breathtakingly sharp lens.
Oh, that's lovely. I think it's good that you're starting to get some other companies developing lenses to fit, because this is all about basically the development of Fuji, basically, isn't it? Rather than having to probably just go along with your own lenses, as good as they are. It's nice to see a development. I think this is probably one of the reasons why the 4/3 market has basically ballooned, mushroomed, whichever word you want to use, because there are so many lenses which are available. Obviously, using an adapter, which you can have adapters to fit to fit the Fujis, but to be fully automated, I think, is an important step forward for Fuji.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to when the X Pro 1 was released, we obviously had the 3 prime lenses. That in itself to a lot of people was a reason to not switch. There's not the flexibility there, especially not to do their work. They're, you know, it's aimed at professional photographers, which is another reason why, unlike other manufacturers, we have always had to reveal our roadmap of lenses in advance. And obviously the biggest danger of that is that we have to apologize when lenses are delayed, where in actual fact, really be apologizing, because it's actually more than most people would do to even tell people. But however, we want people to know, and we want to obviously try and stick to our own targets, etc. But we want people to know what lenses are coming soon. Because if someone, say, for example, is doesn't want to buy the XT1 because there's no weatherproof constant aperture zoom lenses, well, we've told everyone that they are coming. It's just a matter of when rather than if. So it's made it more interesting, but it's I think it was the right call. I think it was the right strategy for Japan to take, and now obviously the roadmap is filling up. We get lots of feedback from people. We try to do surveys and we ask photographers, you know, what is missing, you know, what would you have next, and there's not. If you ask me, there's very few gaps left in the prime. There are a few gaps. There are nice, obvious gaps, so people can probably try and work out and try and guess what's going to be on the horizon next year just by the gaps that are left. But no, it's pretty impressive.
No, I think the coverage, from when I've read the roadmap, I think the coverage is extremely good now. It's probably, I suppose, some of the guys are probably thinking at the top end, like the 55-200, and then going a little bit further, maybe an 80-300, that sort of end. But those are thoughts in your mind.
We have announced that there will be a super telephoto zoom that was announced I believe in January. But the actual, we still don't know what the focal length is going to be. We still don't know what the aperture range is going to be. But again, like you say, it's important to us to tell people that it is coming. We just, you know, and I believe it should be early 2015. So we'll see basically.
So the all-important question now, which we come around to, this regular roadmap which you're developing for the lenses, the roadmap for the cameras. There's a lot of talk on the rumor side as regards to what's next for the X Pro, and the XE2 was a vast improvement in terms of its usability compared to the XE1, focusing and that sort of issues, which personally, I've never had a problem with the focusing on the XE1. I've got to be perfectly honest with you. But so, dare I ask the question here, X Pro 2, is there any way I can glean something from you that you could give us an idea of what's going to happen?
Perfectly honest, I'm not aware of anything at the moment. Now, we've only, if you think the XT1 is still very new, the XE2 is still very new, looking at the kind of the roadmap between when the X100 and the X100S and the XE1 and the XE2, even the X10 and the X20, yes, it looks like there is an X Pro 2 due, but like I said, we've not been given any information yet. I'm pretty confident that something will be being worked on, but until we're sort of given any more information, there's sort of nothing that I mean, if I was purely a betting man, I would be surprised if there wasn't something in 2015.
I'm sure there will be an X Pro 2. I can only assume, from my naivety of the X series cameras as they are at the moment, I cannot see how this can be a full frame camera. I've seen all the rumors floating around it because of the design of the body. As I see it, it probably would mean a total redesign of the body to take on a potential full frame, and of course then you've got to bring in new lenses into it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, to be quite honest with you.
I'm pretty confident it won't be full frame.
Exactly.
Guys in Japan are they're very, very focused on the APS-C sized format. One day perhaps, but I personally, I don't think we need to go full frame. I think the sort of advancements in, you know, if we can try and keep getting more and more out of the X-Trans technology and stuff, then you know, while we can continue to beat full frame or the equivalent to full frame, certainly at higher ISO ratings, then personally I don't think we need to be full frame. But one day maybe. I don't know.
One day, maybe. I think you're right, actually. From what you were saying earlier on, because of the amount of development which has gone into the X-Trans sensor for this size of camera, what we would term basically a 1.5 crop, trying to make that to compete against full frame and as closely as you can to get full frame, and as you said, in some cases outperform full frame sensors. For the time being, it seems as though the X series cameras have got a good basis of development the way through and to stay with the X-Trans sensor as it stands. Just out of interest, Mark, what gear do you use at this moment?
I started on the X10, which was I absolutely love that little camera. I've recently, or more, not recently, but I upgraded to the X100S, and that I would say is my camera. That's the camera that goes absolutely everywhere with me, whether I know I'm going to be taking a shot or not. And that's the reason why I absolutely love that camera. And I've had an XT1 until recently, but it was lent out to a journalist who needed one in a hurry, and I've since then replaced it with an X Pro one purely because I was just worried that if I get another XT1, it will be taken off me again quickly, because the demand for that camera, even now, even though it's been out for a few months, as the demand is still there. But yeah, so X100S and the X Pro 1. My lenses are, I love the 14. I love the 10 to 24, although they are quite hard to get hold of again around these parts. And I use 56, and I've also got a 23, although it's a pre-production one, so I have to be a bit careful about where I publish my pictures. It's an early doors one, but if you ask me, it's such a good lens still. I don't think you can tell the difference.
You don't tell me you strip the EXIF data out when you put that photograph on site or anywhere, do you?
No, I just don't think I upload.
Just don't publish it.
It's not like I'm selling them to a client or anything. I don't see that as a big problem.
Right. Yeah.
I've just got to be careful. But it's such a good lens, that the 23 1.4. I don't know how I managed to miss it on the first time round, but I only really discovered it when I got an XT1. And I think because I use the X100S and I've kind of got used to that focal length, and I frame things up in my mind in a 5mm equivalent focal length. I think that's half the reason why I love that lens as much as I do.
Let's talk about the camera which everyone's talking about now, the XT1. It just to say that it hit the ground running is, I think, is a little bit of an understatement, to be honest with you. We met at the photography show, and your stand was just swamped with people wanting to have a look at this camera. The design of it, I know I keep coming back to design, was totally against what we'd seen before in the X series cameras, where they're the rangefinder style. Was the XT1 developed to attract the photographer that loves the DSLR?
Yes, I think so. I mean, obviously, without the vertical grip attached, the XT1 isn't a great deal bigger, really. In fact, I'd say it's probably smaller than an X Pro one, but obviously with a slightly different form factor. Once you've got that vertical grip on, you've got yourself a mini version of a DSLR. So, I mean, every time we've released a new body, we've always gained a little bit more traction in regards to people, professionals, switching from what their current gear is into this gear. And the XT1 has been the biggest gain of traction yet. It's, as you said at the photography show where we were met a few months ago, the demand for that camera, the amount of people that I spoke to that had already ordered it, they were just coming here to try it out quickly, just to check that they, in case they need to send it back. Whereas previous years with the X Pro one, there was a lot of people with their big DSLRs hanging around their necks, wanting to get a look at it. Obviously, it was focused on imaging now, I'm referring to. But it was very, it was kind of like a maybe one day when I'm too old to carry this stuff. But the enthusiasm for switching their system to the XT1 has been, the XT1 has been, it's been phenomenal. I mean, even with the kind of rather unfortunate, but in the long run fine kind of leaks of information that occurred, but there's a lot of rumor sites giving me a lot of nightmares during January, where I woke up every morning and my very first task at 6 a.m. was to check a particular site that I won't name just to see what they've got most recently, and it's rather frustrating to live your life like that.
Yeah,
But it just goes to show, in a way, it's such a flattering thing that people cared so much about it that
yeah,
that when we announced the product, it just lit up the internet, and it's almost a bit worrying because you've got a lot of hype then to live up to. But I think besides one or two little glitches that you may or may not mention, I think all in all, the XT1 has been a roaring success so far. We just cannot keep up with demand.
yeah. No, I think you're right. From everyone I know who's got one, everyone I know who wants to get one, just speaks high volumes of the camera, and of course it goes without saying the quality of the images coming out of that camera is just quite amazing. Let's just talk about one little glitch, because this is, I think, one of the reasons why, me personally, why I like being associated in my small way with Fuji. We had this light, you have this light leak problem, had it rather, with the XT1. Um, when did the problem first come about? When did you first hear there was this problem? Were you very kindly pointed out by a professional that was using it, or did
Yes, exactly. The
really?
first time certainly I heard about it. Obviously I can't speak for kind of QA in Japan, etc. The first time I heard about it was from an end user. I'm pretty sure that by the time I heard about it, the manufacturing process had already been adapted. So it would seem that the guys in Japan had known about it,
Yeah,
and they adapted the manufacturing process. So yes, unfortunately, a number of early XT1s did go out suffering this particular issue. But I think I'm really well. To be honest, I'm proud to work for a company that's big enough to kind of put their hands up and just say, look, there's a manufacturing issue here, been resolved at the source, and I think every single country across the whole world basically just invited their users to send the camera back to them for them to resolve it, obviously free of charge. And now I know it's still not ideal and it is an inconvenience to some people, but to be honest, our biggest priority was just to resolve it. What kind of possible damage it does to PR, it obviously did damage it. In hindsight, it looks good because we have fixed it and we haven't just buried our heads in the sand. But obviously, it's still a slightly embarrassing thing to happen. But I think with all things, sometimes you can't 100% guarantee that something's never going to happen. But what you can guarantee is how you deal with the problem, and that's something that I'm very
I,
proud to
I,
be working here for that reason.
I agree with you. I'm be quite honest with you. I'm very proud to be a Fuji user because of that, and also the care that the company puts into the firmware coming out for older models. But let's just talk about the XT1 for a moment. I'm not going to press you any more any awkward questions. Just to say that I think the company handled it exactly the right way. They knew there was a problem. They corrected it. When the problem was then came to the fourth, they knew there's. They said, look, no questions asked. Send the camera back, and we'll get it sorted. Unlike other camera manufacturers, I'm not going to mention any names, where basically, as you said, they just stuck their head in the sand and decided, with a bit of luck, this is going to go away. And as we know, it didn't. It just went on and on. So hats off to Fuji for that. And I quite agree with you. It's nice and it's nice. It's good. It's a good feeling to be part of a company that cares for its consumers, its users, the end user.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
we genuinely just think that buying a Fuji camera is not the end of it; it's the beginning of
no,
it. Like you said with the firmware updates, we want people. We don't want people to feel that a camera that's come out with an improvement over a previous camera, they must upgrade to it. I mean, if I'm honest, and I'm putting a salesman hat on, I'd rather you just spend that money on some more of our lovely lenses because we've got loads of them. But you
yeah,
don't
exactly.
need to go from an XE1 to an XE2 because we want to support the XE1 and ensure that where it's within the hardware within the hardware restrictions, that the functionality is there. Things like focus peaking and improvements to autofocus and stuff.
Mm,
Even the X100 was a discontinued model, and we released a major firmware update, which
mm,
had a lot of people talking in Japan. There was a lot of conversation about what's the effect on the X100 sales if you all of a sudden make the old version better and not worth upgrading. and the decision, the rightful, if you ask me, decision was made. Well, don't think about the X100S sales. Think about whatever comes next sales. Think about
Yeah.
people that are, we're in a very, very tough market with some very, very well established players. Our products are good, and we're confident of that, but we've got to make people realize that it's not just the product, it's as well. There's a bit more of a
Yeah, there's
more of a hug.
yeah, exactly right. There's more behind it, and I think it's just fantastic that you do bring out new firmware for older cameras. It's like buying a car, isn't it? Your tires go flat, so I've got to buy a new car now. No, you can get you can go out and buy new tires. But for me, I quite agree with what you said. The XE1, I've got the XE1, and I'm very happy with it. I don't personally feel a necessity for me to go out and get the XE2 because I'm getting regular firmware upgrades for the camera that I've got, which I think is a great ethos. But can you tell me this word Kaizen? You mentioned it to me earlier on, but what is Kaizen?
Kaizen is basically improvement. It's technically a cycle of continually reviewing the product and looking for ways to improve it. And as I said, Kaizen is a very traditional Japanese thing. This is why Japanese car manufacturers are so successful, and obviously our competitors are Japanese. So this is not a unique Fujifilm thing. It's a very Japanese thing, but we try to use it as much as we can because we genuinely think that, as I said before, to make people feel comfortable enough that you've purchased the camera. The last thing we want is someone to feel disappointed that they've bought a camera and then a new version has just been announced. Like at the photography show, I had a lady come up to me, and she bought an XE1 about 2 weeks before the XE2 was announced.
Yeah.
And she felt disappointed. Okay, yeah, the price would have dropped, and there's that sort of side of it, but she felt disappointed. Then the XT1 come out, and again, she felt disappointed. She asked me the question, should I upgrade? And I to be honest, I asked her about what she uses the camera for and how she uses it, and I just said to her, in all honesty, don't upgrade. There's not enough. When you think of the net cost to upgrade, I genuinely don't believe that you need to upgrade. I said, if you want to give Fujifilm some money, that's great, and there's lots of great lenses that you don't have, and maybe buy a lens. But with the firmware updates, and she was running a version 1 XE1, and we put a firmware update on her camera for her, and she was more than happy. And I think she respected the honesty, but at the end of the day, I think we need to build trust before we can just start.
I think that's just a lovely way to talk to someone who obviously it's buying a computer, isn't it? Well, it's buying anything technology. There's always something new round the corner, and it's just your matter of timing. If you always wait, you'll never buy anything. I always remember my son when he was playing golf. He wanted the next driver out. Can we buy this, Dad? Get this driver, and it was just every 6 months there was a new driver coming out, and of course, in the end, you just got to say, look, what you've got is good enough, I'll tell you one thing in actual fact, Mark, that comes about the number of people I speak to. People don't learn about their cameras anymore. They keep changing the camera because they think that's going to improve their photography. They don't learn what the camera can do and stick with something for a period of time. This is what the old pros did in the old days, as I'm sure you'll know. But I think that's one of the problems which technology is causing us now with continued improved performance of technology, be it a computer or a camera. People think, I've got to have the latest and the greatest, and it's not necessarily the case because they haven't learned how the original unit worked.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, our original CSC camera, which was the X Pro 1, is still a great camera, and it's absolutely viable for someone to have that camera. Someone could use it to work professionally then, and they can use it to work professionally now. As you say, there's obviously we're in business. We're making cameras to sell cameras, and obviously the business won't survive if people just stopped buying cameras. But yeah, I agree. I think there's that's why, for example, we can focus on our lens lineup, which is just as, or if not more important, because the lens lineup, so far we haven't replaced the lens. There is maybe the 18 to 55 mils semi-replaced the 18 prime, but it's nowhere near as small. It's still a different lens. But yeah, I agree. You don't need to always upgrade a body. You can learn how to use the body, and there will
Yeah.
always be significant improvements, particularly hardware improvements, like phase detection, autofocus on the XC2 compared to the XC1, or like the tilting screen on the XT1, which is something that you may not see the value of, and 99% of your shots you'll never use it, but that 1% you'll be like, oh my god, I would not have been able to do this
Yeah.
without a tilting screen.
Yeah.
It's a
That's right.
funny old feature, that one. I wasn't totally drawn by it until I used the XT1 and then realized,
Yeah.
wow, I can do this without having a face full of mud or whatever, yeah, whatever the
Yeah. I know
situation
what you
was when I
mean.
was laying on the floor.
Yeah. One of the things which I have heard though is that there seems to be with the post processing, the editing programs, they always seem to be a little bit slow getting latched on to the new products which you're bringing out. Like I know it took some time before the XT1 was could definitely you could sort of download your images to use program. Could you just tell me why is that? Is there a preference for them to work with the bigger manufacturers than the likes of yourselves and others, or
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I guess the biggest problem is that our sensor technology is rather different. So it's not just a matter of for Bayer array sensors, they might have a different number of pixels or a different size, but effectively there's not really that much different in how you handle a picture coming off one camera to the next. Obviously, with the X-Trans, that does make it slightly different. Um, yes, we perhaps when we started off, I don't know, maybe Adobe and Apple and other companies didn't see us as a big enough player to invest as much of their time in it. We are very much restricted to the sort of time that they can release their updates. I'm sure if Canon or Nikon released a really big groundbreaking product, then perhaps Adobe would release a version of Lightroom sooner than their normal steady
yeah,
roadmap, or possibly time a roadmap release to be around the same sort of time. And we maybe don't have that swing. But I think my experience, I think it is getting better. I think the ties between Fuji Japan and Adobe seem to be a lot stronger. I mean, just
yeah,
taking into account the collaboration that we've done recently, where some of the film simulation modes are actually now available as part of Lightroom. That
yeah,
that sort of improvement there, that wouldn't have happened without the relationship there being better. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think the biggest problem is I believe it's just the roadmap. It's just that we get our SDK software development kits over to the guys as soon as we can. But when the XT1 come out, it was already going to be about a month until the next Lightroom update was going to be available, and they
yeah.
weren't going to bring it forward just for the XT1. So unfortunately, we have to wait.
You just have
It's
to wait
obviously
on that one. Yeah,
frustrating, and it is one of the biggest bugbears that our users have. But we're very grateful that people are just quite patient, and it
yeah,
does
exactly.
come down eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame that that happens, but I suppose it's just one of those things you can't expect the Adobe and Apple to sort of drop everything and say, oh, we got a new change here. We've got to make an amendment immediately to our program, and they'll probably be doing that every day, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when they do have an upgrade, you look at the list of cameras that are added to it. There'll be
Yeah,
our Fuji on there, but there might be 20 other cameras that have all,
exactly.
whether they've, maybe I don't know whether some of them are a bit cute and they time their product launches when Adobe are available to do it, perhaps. But even then, you're only ever going to push your launch back. You're never going to necessarily put a launch forward just to get that, and then
Mm.
possibly any
Yeah.
kind of production issues or whatever that might come with forcing a product out.
Okay. Let's talk about your own personal interest in photography now, Mark. What sort of photography do you like looking at, like taking?
It's mostly, I think it's probably mostly portrait stuff. My two subjects are my poor children
Yeah.
that have had a camera pushed in their face since the day they were born. But I mean, personally, I've only really got into photography as a real hobby over maybe the last probably about a year to 18 months. I think, like I said, the X10 was the first camera that I started to use. been here a while, but just before, obviously, our product portfolio wasn't necessarily around photography as a hobby. It was more photography as
Hmm.
capturing memories, and obviously, my family holidays are well documented, but they're hardly artistic. So, yeah, I like taking portraits of my children. I really quite like street style stuff, but I think I've only really got my head around the kind of the technical side of photography at the moment,
Yeah.
and trying to build up the more creative side. I mean, I'm in a fantastic position because I get to hang out with people like Jim Marks and Kevin Mullins and Bert Stefani and these kind of really what I see as great photographers, and then they're amazing at giving up information, but I can't spend all my working days just hanging out with those just.
And I know I experience it myself in my business when I go and do some work overseas. You probably well, overseas abroad, basically in Europe. You probably get a day if you're lucky to walk about and do something for yourself in terms of photography. But from your aspect, with you're going out, I know you're preparing now to do some presentations next week. How does a presentation event go for you? Are you flown? Obviously you go into the city, you do the presentation, and it's back
Yeah.
to base, so to speak.
It's airport, hotel, office, hotel, airport. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I can't think of how many different trips to Germany I've had, but I think I've had one single night in Cologne where I actually got to walk around and do a bit
Yeah.
of sightseeing and take some photographs. It's not particularly glamorous, if I'm honest.
It sounds glamorous, doesn't it? I've said many times to people, well, where you have to, well, I've got to go to Hamburg. And they say, oh, lovely. Well, it's not really going to be that great because I'm going to have sort of basically half a day free. It doesn't really quite work out. They're not holidays, are they? It's business. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I went to Japan for CP Plus in February, and one day the event was closed because of snow. So I basically had an entire day to walk around Yokohama in the snow, in the worst snow that Tokyo had seen in about 40 years. With, as I mentioned before, I was with Kevin Mullins and Stefani, who are both, well, in my eyes, amazing, fantastic photographers. And that was a very rare occurrence, but that was just an amazing day. From the beginning of the day to the end of the day, my entire kind of take on creative photography had changed
Yeah.
a bit.
Lovely. That's lovely. Well, that's a very good segue we've done there. We're at the time of the show where I always ask my guests now. I give my guests 5 names of photographers, and then I ask the guest to describe in one word only either the description of the person's work or the style of the person's work. So uh, let's see how we go with these. We've got 5 names here. I interviewed him a few weeks ago. Actually, he's such a character, Jerry Walden.
Um, I've never actually met Jerry, but I have spoken to Jerry and I've seen a lot of his work. I'd say he's a gentleman. He's a gentleman would be my one word.
Yeah, and the style of work that he creates, his portrait work and his street work. He's done a lot of street photography now. Have you seen
Yeah,
much of that at all?
I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot of the sort of music concert work he did. He did an
Yeah.
exhibition in Southampton where he's from about a year ago, and
Mm.
he's a very talented photographer. Been around the block a few times. Been in the
He
industry
has
for a long,
indeed.
long time.
I had such a great chat with him. He was telling me, in actual fact, these music shots, which is all basically around the jazz thing, he does that while they're practicing,
Yeah,
so that he doesn't get in front of the audience. And he said, I can just go anywhere. I thought it was a great
yeah,
tip. If you get a chance, you're in with a band. Go and watch them
yeah.
while they're practicing.
Yeah, no, we were talking earlier on about kind of photography that wouldn't work with a DSLR, and he kind of used that as an example where
Yeah.
these guys are it's low light anyway, but these guys are they're concentrating on what they're doing. They're
Mm.
without the crowd, they're focusing so much. For him to not be seen, for him to just walk around, they can't hear him clicking, using an
Yeah.
X100 or whatever. Yeah,
Yes, that's good. Yeah. Okay, that's great what you say about Jerry. That is it's a firm favourite of mine now. Next one, David Hobby.
I'd say I've met him once. I'd say honest. I was introduced to him as this is Marc Corner from Fujifilm UK, and And he shook my hand, and he said I was in the marketing team, and he shook my hand and he said, "You have got the easiest job in the whole world." And I was like, "What?" I was saying, I don't know how to take that. I was like, I think I work quite hard actually, and because these products are amazing. How do surely you don't have to market them? You just put them in someone's hand and they buy them. And I was like, "Oh right, I see what you're saying." It was a compliment after all. He's
Exactly.
honest. He's a very, very straight talking fella.
It was his video where he was talking about the X100S on YouTube, which I watched, which basically got me to thinking about switching out of Nikon, which I had before, to Fuji. And of course, Zach Aris did his YouTube presentations as well. But the detail which David Hobby went into when he was talking about his, I believe the X100 at the time, was just amazing. How he just detailed how he had the camera set up and how he used it and all the advantages of it. Was just an amazing presentation. So anyway, so that's a nice segue to the next guy on the list here, Zach Arias.
One word for Zach. Got to be resourceful. That guy can make a flash setup out of anything. Again, I've only met him once, which was the same time I met David. But yeah, he's a very nice guy, and yeah, his ability to turn a cardboard box and a I don't know whatever, a bin liner or something into a soft focusing soft light box, and I'd say resourceful would be my one word for Zach.
Yeah, and then resourceful in actual fact in his career, where basically he went down the tubes at one stage, and he managed to get himself back into photography in a very good fashion indeed. I love watching Zach. I think he's got a great presentation skill when he does his workshops, and also when he does his critique online. They're very useful to listen and watch. He's got a nice style. So it brings me to the final one, who's fast becoming a favourite photographer of mine at the moment, Alex Lambrecht.
Yeah, Alex. I love Alex. Alex is great. He was here a couple of days ago, actually. We've done some workshops with him. I'd say one word for Alex. There's lots of words for Alex. Flamboyant. Yeah, he's an amazing character, to be honest, because he doesn't conform to kind of set rules. He makes his own rules. He has his own style of street photography. He's got his own style of fashion photography. I think flamboyant is a good word to sum up Alex.
Yeah, that it is a good word to use. I talked about him when when I was talking to Jerry, and Jerry said that he thought, in his opinion, he thinks, and he meant this in the most polite way, as Jerry would only put it, his naivety, his newness into photography effectively allows him to get away with these new ideas, but at the same time they're so refreshing in what we're seeing in the magazines, in GQ and in Vogue, where we haven't seen this style of photography really when you're showing that sort of fashion and that lifestyle before. And as I say, he's fast becoming a big favourite of mine in terms. Fingers crossed, I'll be talking to Alex. I went on one of his workshops a few months ago. Took me out of my comfort zone, which he said he was going to do. It was an outstanding workshop.
He's a great guy, and yeah, I totally agree with that. I think because he doesn't have to unlearn the strict rules that are taught at photography university and that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, no, he's a very, very interesting character with a very, very fascinating style.
Yeah, very true, very true. Mark, I can't thank you enough for your time, because I know you're busy getting your presentations ready for your trip out next week. It's been great talking to you, and absolutely fascinating. A little bit of insight into Fuji life, for want of description. And I think it's just fantastic what Fuji are doing, and long may it continue. Bring out those new products for us all, and for us to enjoy, and keep the roadmap building. Basically, I think is the best way to describe it.
You're more than welcome. It's been fun.
Good, that's good. What I'm going to do, basically, for those that are watching, or I'm going to watch the YouTube broadcast at a later date, I'm going to put on the blog the links which Marc's very kindly sent on to me for you to check out a few things, and obviously I'll put on the links to Fujifilm UK and everything else which is available for you there. But basically, folks, at the end of the show now, so thank you very much indeed for watching, and it's that time of the show where I turn around and say to you, leave your camera bag at home. Thank you. Bye for now.